Chapter 20. Justin grimaced as he shrugged back into his shirt. The bone marrow aspiration had been painful, and even after the numbing, he'd still felt a stinging sensation. "Keep the site clean, but don't get it wet for 24 hours, the nurse said as she handed him his discharge papers. "Okay, and will you let me know if I'm a match for Garrett?" The nurse offered a small smile. "Of course. As soon as we know, we'll call you back in. You are doing an amazing thing." "Thanks." Justin grabbed his things, thanked the nurse, and headed for the exit sign. He tapped in Ava's number to see if she wanted to grab dinner, but before he hit send, a voice grabbed his attention. "Justin?" Justin lifted his eyes from his phone to find his brother staring at him. He'd hoped to avoid running into Garrett, but he'd known it might be a possibility. "Hey, Garrett." "What are you doing here?" Justin shrugged, trying not to focus on how sick Garrett looked. His clothes hung on him, and his skin was an ashy color. "Liz told me you needed more bone marrow." "And she told me you said no." "I had, and then an encounter with God and a lovely woman changed my mind. In fact, I believe you've met her. I'm still working on forgiving you, but I would never forgive myself if I could have helped and didn't." Garrett's eyes glistened, and he ran a hand across his chin. "Thank you. And in case Ava didn't tell you, you were right about Candy. She left me a year ago when I first got sick. She said she couldn't handle playing nursemaid." "Why didn't you say anything?" "I tried to, but you wouldn't listen. I should never have chosen a woman over my own brother. I'm so sorry, man." Justin saw that Garrett was barely holding it together, and compassion welled up inside him. Suddenly he saw his brother as he believed God saw him. He'd made a mistake, but Justin had too. Justin had turned his back on his creator for years, and yet God forgave him. Surely he could do the same for his brother, who not only was hurting, but had been hurt by the same woman. He placed a hand on Garrett's shoulder. "I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have shut you out of my life. We all make mistakes, and mine was punishing you. I can't get that year back, but we can kick this thing together and have years to come in the future." Hope glistened in Garrett's eyes, and Justin pulled him in for a hug. He only hoped they would have time to reconnect. Ava glanced around at the small gathering of friends and smiled. She'd organized this little get-together to celebrate her father being released from the hospital following his bypass surgery and Justin's recovery from the bone marrow transplant. But it also served nicely as a way to introduce him to her family and meet his friends. "I'm going to get a drink. Would anyone else like one?" "I'll help you," Justin said, putting his hands against the chair arms. Ava pushed gently on Justin's shoulders to keep him from getting up. "Nope, not you. You are supposed to be taking it easy. I will bring your drink to you." "I'm fine, Ava," he grumbled. "It's been 4 days. And the directions say you should rest for 5 to 7 days. I'm just trying to follow the rules and the schedule you've been given." He was so stubborn sometimes, but she could be just as stubborn. She leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. Peter laughed and lifted his drink in salute. "She's got you there, Justin." Justin crossed his arms and leaned back in the chair. "It's a recommendation, not a schedule." His scowl did nothing but enlarge her smile, as Ava knew he enjoyed being taken care of. Justin, like most men, morphed into the biggest baby when he wasn't feeling well. She'd spent the last 4 days at his house working so she could help him out until he was 100% cleared. Peter had offered to take the nights, and while Ava was tiring of playing nursemaid, she had enjoyed the time with Justin. It allowed their relationship to progress, and he'd even helped her finish her book. It was nice to have a man's opinion on it. And it turned out they had more than just a love of the ocean and Code Red Mountain Dew in common. They also both loved to play Scrabble. She usually clobbered him. And solitaire. He always smoked her time. They both enjoyed walks, though those were on hiatus until Justin was cleared. And they both preferred cats over dogs. Ava would never have thought it possible, but Justin had changed so much since letting God back in his life that she could even see a long-term future with him. Sure, he still used a little too much hairspray, and he'd cringed the first time she handed him jeans with no creases. But those were small things. "There you are," she said to Jen as she entered the kitchen. "I've been looking for you." Jen looked up from the drink she was sipping. "I came in to check my email, and do I have news for you?" Ava crossed to the fridge and pulled out the punch to refill hers and Justin's cups. "What news?" "The publishing company loves your new book." "That's great. And they want to offer an advance on your next book." Jen squealed and turned the phone so Ava could see the screen as well. "What?" Ava's eyes scanned the email. "I can't believe it." "I can. I told you you were an amazing author. You just needed to believe it yourself." Justin smiled as Ava approached, but he could tell something was on her mind. Tiny creases dotted her forehead that weren't normally there, and an expression he couldn't place lay across her face. "Everything okay?" he asked as he took his cup. "Yeah, I just found out that my publishers are offering an advance for my next book." Before she could stop him, Justin pushed himself up and wrapped his arms around her. "That's amazing. I knew you were an amazing author and you deserve it. I just didn't expect it. I never thought I'd be given that kind of money as an advance." "Ahem." Peter cleared his throat, and the attention in the room shifted to him. "If we're sharing news, I have some of my own. I've been approached by MDR Studios to produce a new romantic sitcom, and I've said yes." Justin's jaw fell open. He had always thought he would be the one to leave the show first, but now Peter would be? What does that mean for Who Wants to Marry a Cowboy? Of course, what he really meant was, what does that mean for me? "I was going to talk to you about that. There are 2 options for you. 1, you can continue the show, either as the producer or host or both." Justin wasn't sure he liked that option. Peter was the only reason he had stayed on as long as he had. "Or 2, you can come be my lead actor." "You have the power to offer me that role without even an audition?" Justin's head was spinning. Acting had always been his dream, but hosting had been as close as he'd gotten. "It was part of my conditions. I told them I wanted to have the decision on the lead actor and the lead writer. I was hoping maybe Ava would like to take a chance writing for the sitcom as well." "What?" Ava's mouth had fallen open, and her wide eyes stared at Peter without blinking. "I read your book, the newest one as well as your first. You're funny, and you would make a great scene writer. I'd be honored if you'd write for me, and you'd still have time to write your books on the side." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Justin said with a smile, "because I'm going to." She looked from Justin to Peter to Jen. "Okay, yes." "This calls for a toast. Who's got champagne?" Ava's father shouted over the cheers and congratulations. "Not for you, Dad. You're still recovering, and I don't think champagne is on your new diet." "You're such a stickler," he said, and Justin smiled as he looked around the room. How different his life had become in just a few short weeks. He was mending the relationship with his brother, he had a new job offer he was excited about, and he had the love of an amazing woman whom he never would have met if it hadn't been for Peter and a scatterbrained woman named Margie. Margie, of course. The plan began to formulate in his head.